Welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Megan, and my amazing co-host is...
Hi, I'm Amanda.
Hello. We are your source for messy, imperfect, real-life homeschool advice and community. I just saw a post yesterday from a new parent in a homeschool group, and she was feeling super overwhelmed by all the Pinterest perfect home classrooms she was seeing that people were posting on TikTok. And we cannot stress this enough. That is not real life. It's not. You are not failing. You are not delinquent in your efforts. Most of this stuff is a facade. That mom in that video probably pushed aside her mess to take that video. The fancy classroom probably goes unused more often than not. And her kids are flopped upside down on the sofa reading a book and scribbling in workbooks. It's not real life.
Well, no, I mean, that's it. And the thing is, if she's not letting her kids do the schoolwork that way, they're probably not nearly as happy as your kiddos are. So there's that. But look, the reality is the damage is real. It is verifiable. It's demonstrable. Like that fakety fake stuff that influencers put out there, it hurts in so many different ways. Like the parents, the caregivers who are out there trying to do this for real and not managing fake Instagram life. So we aren't about that here. Please come here expecting 100% realness here. We're not going to let you walk away thinking that we have it all together and that we're totally perfect and that you can never compare because it just isn't true. If this is your first episode, you will learn that. If you've been with us for a while, you know that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The other thing we are all about here are secular and progressive values. Ironically, we tried to share a post the other day in a Missouri-based homeschool group because the last episode we did, we were talking about what counts as school. And Missouri has this thing about counting hours. And so we referenced Missouri a whole bunch in that episode. And so, we'll drop things in Facebook groups like, hey, we have a new episode, blah, blah, blah. And the group admin said she wouldn't approve it because we are political. And it just to me begs the question, when did thinking that human beings deserve equal access to human rights become political? How is that political?
I don't know, but I mean, I think the thing for me out of that whole situation that frustrates me even more is that conservative Christian values aren't considered political. The average homeschool podcast that's just rolling about their lives with their conservative Christian values and sprinkling in their Bible verses and talking about church and everything else, that would be totally fine. But if you are clear about the fact that you have other values, that is political. And how can one side be totally fine and not political, but the other side is suddenly a political issue? Like, I just don't, right? I mean, like these days, is it political to think that the tenets of the Constitution, things like, freedom of speech and freedom of the press and habeas corpus, those things should be upheld? Is that really a political stance? Is that where we're at? Okay, so listen, whether it is appreciated in that particular Missouri homeschool group or not, we will continue to affirm that we believe Black Lives Matter, love is love, trans rights and women's rights are human rights. No human being is illegal, and like just so much more. On and on. There are all of the slogans and taglines and all of those kind of things. We are here for that. We stand there and in that space. The world is on fire and we will not bury our heads in the sand to avoid watching it burn. We're here. We're fighting.
No,
Doing the best we can with a good fight.
we are eyes wide open watching it burn, which is horrifying. But here we are.
Not my favorite version of Eyes Wide Open. I'm going to put that out there.
No, right? However, we will aim to provide you with a brief respite from the chaos for the next hour-ish while we talk about homeschooling. Today, we'll be talking about when to push and when to back off. Finding the challenge point without going overboard can be one of the most nuanced and challenging parts of homeschooling. So let's dig in.
But first, we do try to start all of our episodes the same way with a weekly recap. Again, just that whole like keeping it real and all of that jazz. So if the week has been a total shit show, we're going to talk about it. And look, other weeks are awesome. We'll talk about those too. So how has your week been, Megan?
It's been pretty good. And I'll take it because what was it? 2 weeks ago, I showed up in tears to record. So I was like, I'll take my win this week. Yeah, it's been good. We got a ton of stuff done this week. My daughter's studio supplies have arrived. So if you're new, my daughter is an artist. She has these massive weaving looms that we had to freight to Europe from the US when we moved, and it took time and blah, blah, blah. So while we were in the UK, her pallets arrived. And so we came back to just a wall of boxes and wrapping materials and all kind. It was daunting because the space isn't that big. So it's like you can't really shift anything to unwrap something and whatever. So I spent about 2 days there this week. I'd pop in other times, but like 2 decent chunks of time. And we had some bookshelves come from IKEA and stuff, but it's functioning now. It works and you can move through the space and you can find things. If you need to grab a scissor, they're in a little cart where Gidgets and Gazmos are. It's good. So that was good. Last week, I talked about the highlight of my week being Liam's ear, nose, and throat doctor appointment, which went really well. The doctor was super proactive. I've spent my week gathering CAT scan results from all over the place, but he's got him on 2 medications now to try to prevent ear infections and all this kind of stuff. And then when we see him in about a month, he's going to assess if he thinks he needs tubes or if we can wait longer and try some other things first. But it was just nice to have some action instead of just being like, wow, that sucks. I hope he doesn't get an ear infection anytime soon. Somebody who was like, listen, we're either going to work to prevent these or we're going to do surgery to prevent this. Like, we have to put a stop to this. And I was like, yes. And I successfully scheduled hearing tests at the hospital in Portugal. My Portuguese is not strong. And so I did it. And it was like a little daunting, but I did it. So I felt good about that. The last thing that I've got going on this week that has been interesting is I started for myself a morning basket, which is like such a homeschool concept. And me of all people, right?
I'm sorry.
Are you like,
sorry,
who the hell are you?
Little freaking homeschool morning basket. Okay, continue.
Okay,
Sorry.
but it's not for the kids. It's for me.
Okay.
So I have a planner that I don't look at that often, which is not good. Okay. And then I have too many calendars on my phone. And it's that thing like, this is the planner that's going to get me organized. So I bought this planner when we were in the US over the summer and I wasn't looking at it enough. And so I made a little basket next to my bed that has my morning pill in it and my fiber gummies because I'm a perimenopausal woman and I like my fiber gummies. And my planner and whatever. And so now I have a system that in the morning I do my thing and I check my planner. And then at night I see what's coming up for tomorrow. And I put my eye cream on, which we talked about a while ago, that I was going to start an eye cream regimen. And I've been doing that. And we're like 4 days in and it's going strong. Don't ask me next week how it's going, but we'll see. For right now, it's going well.
Okay.
So
good.
Yeah, it's all good.
Good for you.
Oh, how about you? How's your week been? Do you have a morning basket?
Do I have a morning basket? No, I have a massive pill organizer and it always comes with coffee next to my side of the bed, delivered by my child who knows not to try to speak to me until I've had coffee. It's kind of a morning basket, a morning butler brought in on a tray. So yeah, this week has been totally hit or miss. There have been some good days, right? Like some good, totally good fine days. And then we had one day in particular where the day ended with the kids saying like, well, at least we didn't kill each other and we have tomorrow to see if it gets better. I was like, oh man, you're right. We did not, in fact, kill each other's.
He's inherited your silver lining tendencies.
Yes. Like, it could have been worse. One of us could be dead. Like, well, so yeah, we've got some work to do. This is an appropriate episode to be recording this week.
Oh my gosh. All right. So challenge point. How do we know when to push and when to back off? You should back off before the homicidal phase. Let's go. Let's start there, right? So I suspect this is an episode where Amanda will have more insight. If you're new to the podcast, Amanda's an aggressive academic homeschooler and I'm a loosey-goosey unschooler. And so as unschoolers, we rarely face this issue, right? My kids head down rabbit holes and project paths and all sorts of this. And all sorts of stuff of things that they've chosen, things that mean a lot to them. And so when they hit a roadblock, they're usually keen to power through it or figure out a way around it or ask for help because they want to move ahead with whatever it is that they're doing. So sometimes they need support from me and we can kind of talk about what that looks like. But I think my world is going to be very different on this topic than someone who's approaching school from a more traditional perspective where you're doing things that aren't necessarily a passion project.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that, but then also I'm sure it was different for you when your kiddos were littler and you came up against something that was like, for whatever reason, like the record scratch, right? Like it just is what it is, especially with younger kids. And I think that you can't really talk about challenge points without discussing the importance of a growth mindset. And look, I know that sounds cliche. We're like, oh, growth mindset. I feel the same way, right? Like I'm not big on jargon and things like that. But I really do think that it is worth making sure that you're working on this in both your family as a whole and in your homeschool, as it's going to have really a pretty big impact on whether or not your kids are going to prefer school always be easy, learning always just be easy and not very hard, or if they embrace at least a little bit of the challenge of the figuring things out and finding a way to succeed. So I think younger kids, especially, can struggle with hard things. I don't think there's anyone who has parented a child and been like, no, my kiddo loved it when they couldn't figure out how to tie their shoes, or my kiddo loved not being able to read a book. They thought it was really fun. Those are things that kids struggle with, and younger kids especially, because they just don't have the skills yet to be able to work through that. And so it's important to keep that in mind. This is going to be a harder thing to do with littler kids, the younger the kid. It's also going to be a lot more common with gifted and neurodiverse kids. They can struggle a lot more with this, like, it's not going the way that I think it should. It's not as easy as I think it should be. I've always been fine at this. Why is it a problem now? And tied into that, if you've got a kiddo who has anxiety or struggles with perfectionism, same kinds of things, right? It can make this challenge point issue much more challenging, but it is still worth working on it. Okay, all of that said, in our home, I do like to give everything, I kind of call it the good college try. Like you wait 15 minutes for the professor to show up, and if they're not there, maybe you wait 5 more so you're not the first one to head out, but you don't stay the whole class. You do not have to stick with something that just isn't a good fit or isn't working. But I do think that you have to give it time. And you do have to be flexible. So, what does giving it time look like? For us, that's like 4 to 6 weeks of a regular schedule, or 2 to 3 months if we're throwing travel or wonky schedules into the mix. Now, realistically, we part-time world school, and I'm disabled with loads of chronic health issues and a huge team of medical specialists and way too many doctor's appointments and visits and things like that. So it is really, really unusual for us to have 4 to 6 weeks of a regular schedule. So I hardly ever change things more frequently than about that 3 month window, which is why I often tell people we tweak on a quarterly basis, because
Hmm.
that's about how much time it takes for us in our home to know if something really isn't working or if we're just not doing it right to make it work. And that's what I mean about being flexible. So I think the other part of like making the challenge point work in your home, finding it and sticking with it without pushing your kiddos too hard, is it's not just what's not working, it's about finding potential tweaks together. It might be like, so math really didn't go well today. What didn't work for you today? Right? And again, we've talked about it in so many episodes, this idea of scaffolding and helping build these skills, executive function, and yada, yada, yada. This is fresh on my mind because this is what happened that caused our we didn't kill each other. So just this week, my kiddo, well, he didn't just start this week. He's started AOPS, which is Art of Problem Solving for anyone who doesn't know. It's a very rigorous math program as far as curriculum on the market goes. It's generally considered the most rigorous and challenging that you can like easily buy and do with your kiddo. And it's what comes after Beast Academy for anyone who's listening and doesn't know. So it has this feature, Art of Problem Solving. We're doing the self-paced online version. So he has an actual physical textbook, but he's doing most things online. You can tell it how much time you're going to spend each day and which days you're going to spend that time. So you could say, I want to do 15 minutes on Monday and an hour on Tuesday and 30 minutes on Wednesday. And it will automatically assign a bunch of things to you, video lessons and readings and game playing and problem sets and exercises, like all of these different things. Our plan for middle school honors math was 1 hour a day, 3 days a week. My kiddo can break that up differently if he needs to, but generally speaking, he is wanting to do 2 kind of off days and chunk his schoolwork together. So that's how this has sort of come to be for this year. Now, up until now, my kiddo has always finished in less time than the 1 hour. And that 1 hour was the plan that we made together. This is what it's going to look like for how much I think you need to spend to finish it in the amount of time that we're aiming for, yada, yada, yada. So on this past Wednesday, it took him an hour and a half, which caused loads of frustration and a big meltdown. And that meant that for us, we needed to have a really long talk about how AOPS isn't the homeschool teacher. I am. And I asked him to do 1 hour of math a day. I don't care what AOPS says. I don't care if they said, these are the things that you're supposed to finish today, and now it's overdue. None of that matters to me. We can change it if we need to. Maybe we don't need to change it. Maybe Wednesday was a one off and it just is what it is. Maybe we're not going to use that system at all because it causes too many other problems. Maybe it is helpful. Maybe we use it and we tweak it and say we're doing less work each day than we actually are so that it doesn't create extra stress. I'm not entirely sure what that solution is going to be, but it was important for me to make sure he understood that there's no situation, under no circumstance, do I feel like he should be struggling through a regular math lesson for 1.5 hours a day. And then I asked him what things he could do to make sure that he was only doing 1 hour of math a day, because it's important for us in our house for him to work on identifying those things and to problem solve. That's a life skill that's just as important as learning the pre-algebra. So does this mean that everything is all good? No, of course not. We're still trying to figure out if this is actually going to work. I talked in some previous episodes that we are basically trialing this art of problem solving pre-algebra for sixth grade honors math. It's challenging. And if he's feeling like he's falling further and further behind, or the constant struggle is hurting his love of math and his self-confidence in general, we're going to switch to our plan B, which is another perfectly great pre-algebra curriculum. We do not have to stick with this. But at the same time, we're not going to throw it out just because we had a rough day where there was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication between the two of us. And so it's that idea of making sure that you're flexible. Maybe the curriculum is fine. Maybe what you need to do is scribe for your kiddo because what they're doing isn't working. Maybe you need to do read alouds or maybe not read aloud in our home. Maybe math shouldn't be done first thing in the morning because your kiddo's head just isn't in the right place yet to do math. And so it never goes well. Maybe music after snack time is a disaster. Almost always a lot of little tweaks that can and probably should be made before deciding that something is too hard. And I think that once you've made those tweaks, if you're finding that you're still having a lot of pushback and that it's not going smoothly, if neither one of you is happy about how it's going after you've tried this and you've tried that and you've problem solved and you've worked, it's not a challenge point issue. It's not working issue, and it's time to find something else.
I love all of that. Doesn't at all factor into my world, but it was fascinating to listen about your world. So thank you for sharing. Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I see sometimes too, that I think can be factoring into the do I push or do I back off thing is comparison. Comparison is so dangerous. I had never heard this saying before, comparison is the thief of joy, until Amanda shared it with me. And now I've seen it other places and I'm like, look at that. Amanda didn't just make that up. But I think sometimes even if you don't realize you're comparing or you're feeling pressure from other people in your life, things that you're seeing online, like we talked about, influencers and stuff like that, it can be subconscious where you're working with your kiddo and your kiddo's getting frustrated. And yes, your kiddo is frustrated and yes, you have to handle that. But then there's also a thing that's rising in you going, I'm failing at this. I'm not good at this. He doesn't know this because I suck at this. And he should already know this. And we've done this. And so then you're stressing and it's almost like you start to get frustrated with them because their inability to do the thing makes you feel insecure. And it happens. It's human nature. It happens. So, but that's not going to help the situation because they're like, my almost 14-year-old has a service dog. And when she was in training, we would go down and do training days with her and stuff like that. And the trainer would explain to my son, who leans on a very stressed, tight as a spring pathway, she would say to him, like, all of your energy that's in your body travels through the leash to her. So if you're trying to get her to do something, but you're incredibly stressed, she feels that stress. It's like it travels through like a conduit to her. And so it can be so similar with our kids where we're sitting there and they're struggling with reading. And then you're sitting there struggling going, I suck at homeschooling. This was a huge mistake. My kid's never going to amount to anything. I failed. Everybody who told me I couldn't do this was right. And like you're in a hamster wheel in your own brain and it's not good. So
Yeah.
sometimes we push more than we need to because we're trying to say, well, so-and-so's kiddo is the same age as my kiddo and they just got the star reader award at school. And you saw that kid standing there smiling with the certificate. And then you're now pushing your kiddo harder than you need to or harder than is appropriate for your child. They're different kids. Just because they're both 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, whatever, they're not going to do the exact same thing just because they're the same age. They're totally different people. So sometimes other people's social media can be a factor that we don't even realize. And it's just this insidious little thing. So sometimes other people's social media accounts, feel free to unfollow. You can unfollow without burning a bridge. They don't know that you've unfollowed them. I'm not saying unfriend if it's like your sister-in-law or something and you don't want to cause World War III within the family, but you can unfollow. You don't have to look at it. If it's stressing you out, don't look at it, right? Save your sanity. Questions from relatives, right? You have a nosy mother-in-law or something along those lines. Well, how come he's not adding yet? Because so-and-so's kid down the street is in kindergarten and her kid adds 2-digit problems all day long. I don't really care what so-and-so's kid is doing. Like, I really don't. But that can really get into your head and cause you to push harder than you need to. And it causes friction between you and your kiddo. It causes damage in some cases to their love of learning. In other words, just anything that's an outside perspective that can make you feel inadequate and cause you to push your kid harder than what is age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for them so that you can kind of keep up with these standards that you're seeing and reassure yourself that you're doing an okay job. Come hang out with us. Right? We have a Patreon. We meet on Zoom all the time. We'll tell you you're doing an amazing job. You do not have to push your kid for that level of validation. And you could be like, my kid still can't tie their shoes. My kid is struggling. My kid said we almost killed each other this week, whatever it is. And we'll still tell you that you're doing an amazing job. We might give you some feedback too on ways you can tweak it and make it smoother, but we'll be your validation for you. Don't worry. But if people from the outside are causing you to push your kids harder than you need to, you can silence those people.
I mean, yeah. And even if you can't silence them, find yourself a good group. Again, like Megan said, we have the Patreon, there are other groups. Find yourself a good group of like minded people that can help you kind of come back. We talked a lot about, it's a lot of younger kids and younger issues. But as we, as academic aggressive homeschoolers, start looking more towards high school classes and preparing for college admissions and things like that, it's getting even worse. I feel like there's these kids that are doing a million service projects. And in my kiddos circle, a bunch of the people that we're friends with, their kids are already in some kind of like junior honor society instead of the regular national honor society. There's like now a junior one for middle
Mhm.
schoolers. And, it's like, how do we find that? Do we try that? But then there are these requirements. And if my kiddo isn't really interested in doing it, do I push him to do it because it's important because everyone else is going to have it on their application? And trying to make sure that you stay true to this, what works for your kiddo works for your kiddo. And yes, being homeschooled, they have less peer pressure to do things. If they were in a regular brick and mortar school, maybe they would achieve it because all of their friends are achieving it and they're at home. And so they don't really feel that, oh, I have to do it to fit in with everyone else. And can you be okay with that? When surrounding yourself with those people, it is so important because at the end of the day, you have to remember that your job isn't to force outcomes. It's to guide, it's to scaffold, it's to help develop readiness and design the next steps. The beauty of homeschooling is its flexibility and the ability to do what your child needs to meet your child where they're at and help gently push and guide them forward.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think one of the big keys too, when you're trying to decide if should I push, should I not push, and it's hard. It's so hard. I mean, I like if I push too hard, am I going to turn them off learning? Am I going to stress them out? If I don't push them hard enough, am I going to regret it? Or they're going to come back years to come and say, why didn't you push me to do this thing? So we get it. It's hard. But one thing you can do is take a minute to step back and really find out if what you're asking or what you're expecting is age and or developmentally appropriate. And I don't mean compare it to the public school system. So in other words, those books that are out there that are like everything your third grader should know. I'm not talking about those because that's the public school standard. And we've done episodes before on early education in the public school system and how not amazing it is and how not age or developmentally appropriate it is. We have an entire course on how to approach education before the age of 6 that is age and developmentally appropriate. And it's not just Megan and Amanda said so. It's hundreds of hours of studies that we poured over to put this course together. So, not looking at the public school system as your guiding light, but looking at what is actually age and developmentally appropriate. Because, yeah, this kid who just wrote a paragraph in kindergarten, okay, great, but that's not age or developmentally appropriate. Just because the mom posted it on social media doesn't mean your kid needs to be doing it. That is not the goal necessarily for every single kid. I mean, we've talked about it in other episodes about early academics lead to early burnout. It doesn't lead to enhanced scoring and progress later on in life. We've shared all of these statistics before. So take handwriting, for example. We've talked about the fact that their little hands are not developed until about age 7 or age 8 to be sitting and doing tons of pencil activities and fine motor activities. Their little hands are just not ready. And we see posts all the time that are like, my 3-year-old is so cognitively genius that she needs more. And I'm like, right, but that doesn't mean putting a pencil in her hands, because you can be cognitively genius all you want. Your hand still isn't formed.
It didn't
That
make
hasn't
your
made,
bones and cartilage grow faster.
right. That's not how that works. So pre-writing activities, things that strengthen hands, things that are good for fine motor activities, those are what are age and developmentally appropriate. The number of posts we see about people who cannot get their 5-year-old to sit down and focus to do schoolwork. Guess what? That's what is age and developmentally appropriate. They should not be able to sit down and do schoolwork at that age. I mean, maybe you
Yeah.
get a couple of minutes here or a couple of minutes there, count yourself lucky, but to do that routinely, that's not a thing.
Yeah,
No.
that's an outlier, and there are outliers, and there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
outliers, but outliers should not be your guiding light.
Exactly. And then the other thing you have to factor in too, if we're using handwriting as an example, is neurodivergence. You've got kids who are ADHD, kids who are autistic. Muscle tone usually comes into play with autism. You've got kids with dysgraphia. You have all sorts of stuff at play. So what that kid is doing that you're seeing online or that lives next door and the mom is always bragging to you while you're checking your mail or putting your trash cans out doesn't mean your kid has to be hitting those same benchmarks. It's okay. There are alternative options that are neurodivergent affirming that are going to be amazing for your kid, right? Absolutely amazing. And so you'll see these posts in Facebook groups where somebody will say like, I can't get my 5-year-old to hold a pencil and do workbook pages. And the number of people who are like, put a pencil grip on it. And I'm like, oh my God, listen, I'm all about accommodations for neurodivergent kids, for disabled kids, for whoever needs them. But a pencil grip is not an accommodation for a 5-year-old being 5. That's what they're supposed to be doing at 5. They don't need a pencil grip. They don't need a pencil. They'll be fine. So check that it's age and developmentally appropriate before you start, hammering at your kid to start doing these things because you feel this need to keep up, or it's in the what every kindergarten kid should know book, or whatever the case might be.
Well, yeah. And so the next couple things we're going to run through are some examples of that, like developmentally appropriate. I think sometimes, and we've talked about this in a few other episodes before, but sometimes we forget that you have to explicitly instruct your kiddos in a lot of things. And so much of their learning is about scaffolding. And I think as homeschoolers, as grown-ups, sometimes we forget all of the little building blocks that need to go into something. And so, like Meagan mentioned, the paragraph or the 5-paragraph essay. I know when my kiddo was in an actual public school, like he had to do his first 5-paragraph essay in first grade, which is not at all developmentally appropriate. And he didn't learn anything about how to effectively write a 5-paragraph essay by having to put one together in first grade. It was not useful. So when we came home and we really started working on writing instruction at home, it becomes like going back to the basics and making sure that you're like really solid on your foundation. You're going to scaffold these kinds of things. You're going to start with oral narration, having them tell stories. Maybe you do oral narration with scribing so that they can see their stories come to life on paper. After you've done oral narration, you're going to work into creating sentences, and then you're going to work on adding descriptive words in your sentences, and then you're going to work on sentence combining. And then from sentence combining, you might go to single paragraph work, right? The single paragraph, the frame, the hamburger organizer. It did not work at all in our home, but loads of people love it. Maybe it's color coded with the stoplight colors. That's a system that we've had success with. There's so many different options out there, but you're going to go from sentence combining to just a single paragraph with support. And then from there, you're going to go to a single paragraph with less support. And then from there, you're going to work on expanding that single paragraph into 3 paragraphs. and it's going to be a mini essay. And then from there, you're going to talk about how you take your single paragraph and you can turn it into a 5-paragraph essay. And then from there, you're going to talk about how you can take that single paragraph and expand it into a full research paper. But each of these steps has to be explicitly taught. You were not a high schooler who just one day was like, oh, I'm going to write my first 8-page research paper and turn it in and I'll get a great grade. Each of these steps was taught really clearly. And hopefully we do better for our kids than public school is doing and did do for us and for the kids out there now. But the only way that happens is if we're really clear about the fact that we have to explicitly teach it and scaffold it. We cannot just expect kids like, well, it is age appropriate for you to be able to write a 5-paragraph essay. So please write a 5-paragraph
Do
essay.
it.
But now it is not developmentally appropriate because you didn't develop anything up to that point. Don't do that.
Well, and I was just listening to you run through that whole thing, and I
Mhm.
totally agree with everything that you said. And I was thinking back to the episode we did a couple of weeks ago about the difficulty with all-in-one programs. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, like, how is that equating to what you just talked about? How does a kid get from Mia Academy or Time for Learning or one of the to be able to do what you just did, right? They
Yeah.
have online supplementation has its place, but that's not scaffolding in that way and giving that sort of structure and feedback and knowing when to push a little bit and knowing when to pull back and knowing when to handhold and knowing when to say, I'll be right here supporting you, but from the kitchen, it's just different. It's a very different
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you mentioned public school and not necessarily doing it the same way. I think reading is another big one. If you're not reading by the end of kindergarten now, you are doomed for life at this point in the public school system. I mean,
Yeah.
the number of kindergartners with tutors that are going to Kumon and whatever else, it is not necessarily age appropriate for a kid to be reading at 5 or 6 years old. There are plenty of kids who do not figure out reading, even with support and scaffolding, till 6 or 7. Some even go into 8 before they're really feeling confident with it. They've got some of the building blocks a little bit earlier, but they're still working on kind of connecting those things. So it is okay. And the more stressed and the more panicked you get about reading, you're approaching the 5.5 month mark, 5 years old, 9 months, 10 months, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be 6 soon. And they're not reading still, right? That's okay. It's 100% okay. And so you do not need to push in those situations because all you're looking for are really just like these baby step forwards, working on building phonemic awareness and playing games that way, working through decodable texts, just doing kind of short daily practice. And at a kindergarten level, when I say short daily practice, I'm not talking about sitting down and being like, it is time for our reading lesson. But it could be like they're in your lap while you're reading a book together and you're saying like, oh, these words are familiar. And maybe they start to kind of call them out because they're seeing them and they're familiar. And so it's kind of this very natural and organic way of analyzing words together and identifying letters together. And there's always audiobooks. Audiobooks are going to be building their love of reading, their love of stories, their imagination, their vocabulary, all this kind of stuff. So you can continue to allow them to grow and have those adventures while you're putting the building blocks to reading in place. It's okay.
Yeah, another thing, we talk about audiobooks, and audiobooks are great, especially if you've got easy access to them. A lot of libraries have it set up so you can access them, but then it can also be a little hard to be able to get them to your kids. There's a lot that goes into that. Something I think a lot of people don't realize, and again, I'm a big proponent in always keep an eye on your kiddo if they're on YouTube, but so many books are on YouTube now where
Mm.
people read them and flip through the pages so you can look at the pictures and they're being read to your
Aw.
kiddo. There are so many options. And I think it's called Story Time Online or Story Online or something like that. And it's got all of these great like actors and people who are influential and important and they're reading books. They get to pick the book that connects with them and read it to kids. It came out during the pandemic, but it's still there. There are lots of options where it doesn't have to be you sitting down or you telling them like, okay, now we're going to read another one of these, step 1 level reader that you don't actually care about. You can look at picture books that they would never be able to decode because there's a lot of new homeschoolers and parents in general who are working on reading do not realize that picture books are not kid reading friendly. The average picture book is a much higher reading level or Lexile level, if you know what that means, than a new reader could ever figure out. Picture books are not meant for kids to read. It's meant for them to look at the pictures, to enjoy the pictures, listen along to the story.
Mhm.
Please don't expect them to be able to read that. That is like the fastest way to just make them feel like they're such failures and they'll never be able to read. There are picture books that I'm like, I don't know that word. Let me go Google that.
Yeah, instead, you might have to take up day drinking and read those god awful Bob books because they're what's they're
Auto.
brutally painful, but they're age appropriate.
It's yeah, it is. Auto is much better. Expensive, much more expensive, but there's this little Auto robot series, like $5 a piece with 27 words per book. But kids, they're cute. Anyway, okay, so next, and again, this is another one of those. We've talked about it many times. For sure, go back and listen to another episode if you want more specifics on this. But working independently is not something your kiddo is just going to be able to do. Executive function skills continue to develop. I mean, honestly, they develop throughout your whole life, but really, they are very firmly developing into your 20s. So, this idea that just because your kiddo is in middle school, they should be able to pick up a planner and go sort it all out on their own, it's not true. It doesn't work that way. Beyond the fact that in middle school, their brains are awash in hormones and puberty is going crazy, and they've actually taken 18 steps backwards in their executive functioning skills when it comes to that age range. But just keep in mind again, scaffold, scaffold, scaffold. If you take anything away from this episode, remember to help scaffold with all of these things because that will help you make sure that you have a better understanding of whether or not you can continue to gently push or it's time to back off. So, with working independently, you're going to be looking at things like visual checklists. Sometimes when they're younger, it's better for it to be pictures because they don't know the words just yet. Maybe it's color coded because that helps them know what they're doing. 5 to 10 minute timers. We posted it. I'm pretty sure there's a link to the one that I really like. There's like a color coded countdown timer, and there's one that has a rainbow. We have that one now. There's lots of great options, but like visual timers, things like that. And you keep it in short chunks so that your kiddo is working on this thing for this time and visually they know that they're doing it, right? There's that I can, we do, then you do thing. It wasn't really a big hit in our home, but that's our personality. Body doubling. I know Meagan, they do that a lot in their home. Clear stopping points, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Maybe it's like what I was talking about earlier in the episode of like an hour. Do not go past an hour because you're frustrated and it's dragging and you're getting more and more and more upset. Like these things are not helpful. And as you work on that at these smaller chunks, you might have to remind your middle schooler that you said an hour and you really meant an hour, but you've scaffolded up to that point. And so it's just a single discussion of like, hey, remember, this is how this works. And you can get back on track faster because you have built that in and you're there.
I think we did an episode way back when about parenting styles too. But I think to the point of when you should push and when you should back off kind of thing, if you toss your kid a workbook and say, do these 4 pages today. And I mean, how many posts do we see where it was like, it took hours and there were tears and there was flopping on the floor and there was this and there was that. And then in the comments, you're going to get no screens until schoolwork is done, no outside time until schoolwork. You're going to get these like hardcore, like, you know, parenting advice where like the spare the rod BS, you know? And it's like our goal with this, with when to push and when to back off is like, okay, fine. If it took 2 hours and there was flopping on the floor and moaning and complaining and all this kind of stuff when you said do 4 workbook pages, have you scaffolded up to that point?
Yeah.
Have you done that thing? And if you have, and if they've done that often and you know that they can do that, okay, today might have just been an off day. If it's happening all the time and you know they have the skills to do it, then maybe you can push a little bit harder. But then also, what is the point of pushing a little bit harder in those cases? Is there a different way that you could just go back and retool it a little bit and see how you could do it differently? But I think every time I see no screens until this is done, or no this, or they can't do this, or they can't do that, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, but there's so many better ways to fix it than just like restrictions and punishments. There's so many better ways to go about these things and knowing whether or not you should push or not push.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Okay.
And we've brought up a couple of times throughout this episode with some of the scaffolding and independence and stuff like that. We've talked about neurodivergence. We've talked about ADHD, autism, dysgraphia. Of course, it extends beyond that into things like dyslexia and other neurodivergence diagnoses. And the biggest thing here, if you suspect neurodivergence because you've got persistent pain points with scaffolding, whether it's with reading, writing, math, attention, behavior, whatever that might be. If you're continuously banging your head against the wall with this stuff and you're ending your day in tears, or your kid is, or both of you are, and school sucks and every day is an uphill climb and it's just all bad, and you're questioning everything about homeschooling, go get an evaluation in any which way you possibly can. We know they are expensive as hell if you live in the United States. It's criminal. It is what it is. If you can go through your school system because you have no other option, use the school system if that's your only option. If you can get a private evaluation, get a private evaluation. They're much more thorough. They're much more complete. Going to your pediatrician and completing a 2-pager for an ADHD screening is not an ADHD diagnosis. There are so many neurodivergencies that look like one another, that overlap one another, that mask other ones. So a truly thorough analysis is what you need if this is a persistent issue. And unfortunately, that is expensive. And the wait times are usually awful. But you just absolutely 100% need to know what you're working with and what you've got going on. So
No, yeah,
yeah,
I
go ahead.
just absolutely like I cannot stress that enough. And I know that we have a huge amount of privilege to be able to say that we went and did a private evaluation or assessment. We personally saved our HSA money for a couple of years. We saved up that way and then used our HSA to pay for it because we found someone who was willing to take it. But yeah, the best thing that we did, because that was us. When it came to writing, we were both in tears day
Mhm.
after day after day, curriculum after curriculum, class after class, or unit study, or purchased packet off of Teachers Pay Teachers. Like we just could not figure it out. And we got the assessment. We were fortunate enough to be able to go to an educational psychologist who in the report to us was like, stop doing this, stop doing that. Do not buy another workbook like this. Do not use this kind of curriculum. Maybe this kind of curriculum would work well for him. Maybe this kind of thing would be good. Look into this, look into that. And she knew we were homeschoolers, and still she gave us a huge list of potential accommodations and things to look at using and doing. And it made such a difference. It is a huge part of what put us on a path to where now we're crying about math, not writing. That's a whole other story. You win some, you
Yeah.
lose some.
But you can push all you want. And if your kiddo's neurological wiring can't do that thing, or can't do it the way you're trying to get them to do it, it's just a recipe for disaster. And nobody's getting anywhere except frustrated. So it's not going to be good. So yeah, definitely if you can. And we know it's expensive, especially in the US. If you're listening from somewhere else, have at it. Somebody sent me a message today asking me a question about getting a mammogram or something in Portugal. And they were like, how much is the clinic that you guys go to? Because we go to this kind of like concierge clinic that's everybody speaks English and they have all the specialties in one house. And it's just easier to navigate as people who are not Portuguese. And I said, I don't think it's bad because it's about €100 to see a specialist. But I go, you have to factor that I'm an American, and they weren't. So I was like, for me, a specialist for €100 is like, oh my
Take my
gosh,
money.
this is great. Yeah, exactly. So if you're listening from somewhere else, oh, we're envious. Anyway, all right. So Amanda has a couple more tidbits for you before we wrap up. I just wanted to put out a formal invite. We've kind of mentioned it a couple of times, but if you have never checked out our Patreon, come over and check it out. Amanda puts out a newsletter every month that's free for everybody. You can just follow along for free. You don't even have to create an account on Patreon to follow us over there. And we put out bonus content and things like that. And then beyond that, we do have varying degrees of membership. We put out a unit study every month. We're actually finalizing the one for October right now, which is about the New York City subway system. And we work on them together, but I go down interest-led rabbit holes that I'm like, Amanda, I'm 7 hours deep into watching how the electrical engines work on the trains. I get a little invested in them. Last month, the amount of time I spent watching people twirl pizza dough in the air because we did one about pizza I was like, this guy is like a 9-time world champion of twirling pizza dough. So we have those on there. We have live meetings. We have our book club over there. Right now we're reading a book about AI and education, but that'll be done in another 6 weeks or whatever. And then we'll pick another book and you can show up. You don't even have to read the book to show up. If you're like, what do I want homework for? There's no homework. Just come. We have great conversation. There's always sport. There's always something new to learn. It's a really friendly group. It's secular. It's progressive. Trying to find that in the homeschool world is like finding a needle in the haystack. So come hang out with us. There's a link in the show notes. Come hang out with us over on Patreon. We would love to welcome you.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, so last, just a couple of ideas. Again, this is by no means exclusive, inclusive, or all that you should be thinking about, but just some ideas that can be especially helpful for neurodiverse learners. But truly, these are good for all learners, for everyone. So the first one would be, they call it the just right challenge. But basically, it's this idea that for most things, you're aiming for a 70 to 85% success rate. And if you're wanting to stretch, it might be 10 to 15% beyond what's comfortable. But this is one of my big things. Like, why are we aiming for perfection, especially in schoolwork? I will never understand. In my life in general, I live by the 80-20 rule. Like, you get 80%, like, you're not going to get 100% of what you want. 80%, call it good. It's a win. Yay. Yeah, yay. It's a win. Call it
But
good.
don't you think part of that is the fact that we are homeschool parents and caregivers, and there's already this microscope on us, like we're inferior, we're not capable, all of that. In the school system, an 80% is fine. But for some reason, for us, like when society looks at us, I think sometimes we feel like it has to be perfect because people doubt us and throw objections at us all the time. I'm not saying that people shouldn't. I think the 80-20 rule is great. I think that what you're saying is great. But I think that's why people aim for perfection sometimes, right? Is this outer influence that comes in that's like, you have got to do this perfectly because you made this choice and you took this on. And we don't have to own that from other people.
Yeah, that's a them problem, not a me problem.
Yeah.
That's a you problem, not a me problem. So yeah, 80-20 rule. Just embrace it. It's all good. We kind of talked about it before, but the micro goal and timer. So that might look like, do these 2 math problems and then take a break, write 2 sentences that include 2 descriptive words and a conjunction, and then take a break, whatever that looks like. But it can be very useful to really chunk things, break it down into small things that are easily achievable, and build from it, scaffold, and that's a good way to do it. A third one, choice. You want to do this on the whiteboard or in your notebook? Do you want to do it with me, or do you want to do it on your own? This doesn't end when the toddler years are over. I know we all survived the toddler years by saying, do you want the blue cup or the red cup? Do you want to brush your teeth with the blue toothpaste or the pink toothpaste? But this does not end. I like having a choice. I'm pretty damn sure you like having a choice. Everyone likes having a choice.
Yeah.
Use choices. You want me to do this with you, or on your own? Do you want to do this first or that next? It's choice. Use choice.
Mhm.
We all like it. There's this idea that's called model prompt fade. And again, it's just another way of thinking of scaffolding where you have fewer prompts with each repetition of something. And part of this too is that idea that you make sure you praise the strategy, not the score. Did they understand what they were working on? Did they put in the effort? Like, the final product is not nearly as important as the steps that they took to get there. It's kind of that thing with math. It's not always easy to convince them to show their work. But if they show their work, it's much easier to be like, you did great. You totally understood the concept. Like, oh, you transposed a number here and you got the wrong answer, but you totally understood the concept. And that's what I wanted.
Mhm.
And then again, this is one of those things, we all appreciate this. If you have ever worked in any sort of a grown up adult environment, whether it's nonprofit or corporate, the warm start, where you begin with a guaranteed win, like the first project you assign or the first task for the new group, the new project team, is something that you're going to knock out of the park. And then you do the harder thing that you're like, this is going to take a little bit more work. But like, the first thing you plan or you assign or whatever is something that will go easily and smoothly and it'll be a big success. Like, this human nature.
Yep. I'm laughing because I had that the other day. I went to the pharmacy to drop off Liam's 2 prescriptions, and one I was able to get right away. And the other one, the pharmacist said, we have to compound this. Can you come back tomorrow? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I go, can I pay for it now, though? And she was like, sure. And I was like, well, I want to submit it to the insurance so I can check it off my list. My list will have one less thing if I can submit the receipt today because I already have the claim started for the doctor's appointment, and then I'll have this prescription. So if I could just put tomorrow's prescription into, and she was like, no problem. I totally understand. So yeah, it's like that psychology of it. I felt so
Mhm.
much better once it was submitted and off my list of things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, all valid.
Yep.
Yep. And these
Exactly.
things go well into, like you said, into the teenage years, because some of these things are things that happen in my house too. So yeah, I like it.
I mean, come on. Some of these things are things I wish my husband would remember to do with me, and I 100% do with my husband. Okay, give him a small task that you know for sure he'll be able to accomplish easily, and then give a harder task so that he's more invested. These are not complicated things, and he's 50. Okay,
Hello, I'm 44 and I gave myself a morning basket. So,
exactly.
right? Whatever it takes. Okay.
Yep.
So too funny. It's funny because my daughter and I don't know if I've mentioned it on a podcast episode or in our Patreon meetings. I can't recall, but my daughter and I have been co-writing a book together about her educational journey. And we do the micro goal timer type thing. Today, I already texted her because she's out at a gathering of yarn nerds at the moment. And I said, just so you know, when you get home tonight, I'd like to tackle 2 chapters of the book. Right. And so it's like, but you have to know how many chapters we're going to do. And it's like, okay, we'll do this one and then we'll be done. And I was thinking about it, like the book will come out and people are going to be like, oh, I can't believe that she got her 16-year-old to co-write a book with her. I'll be like, yeah, 2 chapters at a time. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter. It's still that like plotting away and, knowing which days are going to be good for this and which days aren't based upon her energy level when she comes home and all that kind of stuff. It's no different.
Yeah.
It's the same
Yeah.
thing. It'll just be in a book form when it's done.
Exactly, exactly. Keeping all of the realities in mind as you ask for the things and you implement these things.
Exactly. My goodness. So we have a mantra for you today, but before we wrap up, we would love to ask you wherever you are listening to us, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever, if you would give us a like and a follow. Manda does stats because numbers make my brain hurt. So I don't know most of the statistics for the podcast, but I do know that we're almost at 1,000 followers on Spotify, which has me super excited. I don't know what they are anyplace else, but that milestone number is within reach. And I'm like, ooh, it would be so fun if we hit it. So like and follow. The whole world is run by an evil algorithm at this point. So the more likes and follows we get, the more people find our podcast and the more secular and progressive homeschoolers we can make feel less lonely in a world of really bonkers homeschoolers lately. It's just with the turning point academies popping up left, right, and center. Finding a secular and progressive niche is really good right now. So like and follow, please.
Yeah, no kidding.
So our mantra for the end of this episode is adjust the demand to match the development. That's good teaching, not leniency. It's
Yeah.
okay. You don't have to push if they're not ready.
Yep. Yeah, no,
You're good.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today, everyone, and happy homeschooling. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, have a good one.